This is Jonathan Yates with College AD. Welcome to George Mason University. We're here for an interview with Brad Edwards, the athletic director, or, as we call it in the industry, in the big chair. Mr. Edwards, thank you for taking the time today.
Thanks, Jonathan. Always great to be here and this opportunity with you. So welcome to George Mason.
Thank you very much. Let's go back to your playing days. You were an all-state quarterback at Douglasburg High School, North Carolina. You won the state championship. Then you were defensive back with South Carolina. What was that first day of practice like when you realized those 300-pound offensive linemen were coming to hurt you?
That I've made a big mistake. It really started when we started running, and I realized all of a sudden I was no longer just taking 7-step drop backs and unloading the ball or running the option. I was at track practice, and but I kind of made had the realization that I've sort of made my bed. I'm now going to sleep in it. And South Carolina literally spent a good bit of my freshman year talking to me about switching back to quarterback, but they ran the veer. And I didn't want to, I knew the way to the next level was dropping back and throwing the ball or playing in the secondary. And so, but I really had no idea what I was doing when I got started. I'll be perfectly honest with you.
Now, speaking of the next level, I do photography. I was on the field for the USC Clemson game this year. This is the first time I've taken pictures at an SEC game. I've never seen anything like it in my life. What was it like for the first time you came out of that tunnel? You're surrounded by the stadium.
Oh, it's an amazing experience, and certainly when I played at South Carolina, it was a capacity of a little over 75,000 at that point in time, which was, commensurate with really what was some of the best stadiums in the Southeast, in the country at that point in time. And we played an unbelievable schedule, being a major independent. And but I will never forget. I grew up in North Carolina. My dad played baseball at NC State, so we grew up. Really, what we did most was going to see ACC basketball games and going to Reynolds and Little John and Cameron and Carmichael and all those gyms But both South Carolina and Clemson were recruiting me, and so I decided to take an unofficial visit down there my senior year to South Carolina. The game was in Columbia. And when I came back and somebody asked me, said, well, how did you like it? And I said, oh my God, those people hate each other down there. I said, I've never seen anything like it. And it was not safe to be wearing anything orange around that stadium. But it was that kind of passion and, that really attracted me to, a place like that. And we had I had an amazing experience there, and people remembered.
Did it compare at all to the Cowboy-Redskins games back at RFK when you were there?
No, I mean, in that era, unfortunately, I feel like that rivalry is maybe not quite as intense or passionate as it was at that point in time. But the Cowboy-Redskin rivalry, when I played in it particularly, and before that, it was of national scope and in some ways international in many ways, and it just. You could go to any city in the country and find people that were on both sides of that conversation, and that really is the difference. At least at that point, I think you're seeing some national, scope that's rivaling that, and with some of our college programs. But at that point in time, it was just it was really bigger than life.
In your athletic career as a professional, you had the good fortune of playing for Joe Gibbs with the Redskins and working for Dr. McGee at the University of South Carolina. Right. What did you learn from two legends like that? Yeah,
Joe. First of all, I mean, Joe Gibbs was, and I really go into, you can talk about hiring. I go into every hire trying to think about, how do I find the next Joe Gibbs? Not just in terms of what his accomplishments are going to be, but the kind of person that he was and the kind of leader that he was. And he was, someone that was just extraordinarily smart, was very honest. He really played no games with anyone. It was a constant, here's where you are and here's where you need to be. But he was also very direct on, this is a bottom line industry. We have to produce or we have to find new jobs. I mean, he was, but not in a threatening way ever. But his attention to detail was just extraordinary. He never let you practice a bad habit ever. You would stop, do it right at full speed, and then move forward. And Mike McGee was a lot like that. I mean, Mike was incredibly bright, as you know, one of the smartest people in our business. And Mike would just, as a young professional walking down the hall, you better have not just plan A, but plan B, C, D, and E in your back pocket, well thought out and researched, and he would not let you get away with any kind of anecdotal information, or you better do your homework and it better be, you know, steeped in fact. And that was an experience and a training ground for someone like me. You know, I had some experience in private business. A good bit of my NFL career, I'd worked for Merrill Lynch, and you know, so I had some Office 101, but nothing like when I got to work for Mike and how he just drilled you on doing your homework and being prepared.
I think the Redskin team that you were on that won the Super Bowl, I think that was the best NFL team in history. You basically went undefeated. People don't realize you gave up the Cowboy and Eagle games because you were already in the playoffs.
Right.
In addition, you played that year without your best player, Gerald Riggs.
Right.
If you had had him coming out of the background, no one would have touched you. And I read it, someone said about that team, one of the players, that said, I have never been on a team with so many 7s and 8s in my life. When did you realize that you guys had something special?
I think it was, what's interesting, my first 3 seasons were all divisional playoff years that all ended in Candlestick Park in San Francisco to the hands of Joe Montana and then Steve Young. And so we'd been on really good teams that were very close to being, any of those 3 teams could have been a Super Bowl champion. But that next year we started out 1-3 in preseason, and I really kind of had a feeling early on that this might be the worst of the 4 teams at one point if we didn't pick it up, because to your point, there were a lot of 7s and 8s. The culture there was extraordinary, though. The locker room was one of the most supportive that I've ever been in, but at the same time highly competitive. And then we went out and beat Detroit on opening day 45-0, and it just, you could see it come together, and I had that sense of, wow, did I misjudge preseason, you know, and then it just started to build from there. And it is interesting as you try to build, you know, put the right kind of athletes, you know, together on all kind of different teams, and the competitiveness, but at the same time the supportive nature of that group of individuals. When we get together now, it isn't so much that we talk about, wow, we won the Super Bowl. It's a slam on the table of, we should have gone undefeated, and why didn't we pull that off? And it's just it's a real statement of the kind of competitive nature that group of coaches, you know, and the culture around that locker room that those men had.
You know, in terms of competition, you've succeeded at every level. You were All-State in high school, All-American in college, All-Pro in the NFL. Have you found the same success moving up the world as an athletic director, Newberry to Jacksonville and now to George Mason?
And again, I've been fortunate because I've played in great programs. You know, my high school coach is the 14th or 15th winningest coach in high school, American high school history. Joe Gibbs is arguably one, you know, the greatest, if not one of the 5 greatest coaches in NFL history. Pete Carroll was my position coach my first couple of years in the league as a safety, and
he's another great coach.
Yeah, and so I've been very fortunate that I've been in great programs and around, you know, great people, and I think, you know, athletically is just administratively within college sports, it's just an extension of that for me. It's really been an extension of being around great teams and great people, and, you know, obviously George Mason, a great university, South Carolina, where I was obviously for, you know, most of my administrative career, and it's just, I look at it as I'm living my vocation, and you know, if that makes sense. And so I think, yeah, we looking back at South Carolina, where we drove that from, you know, a top, I think we were 11th in the Sears Directors Cup one year as our highest finish, the first national championships in that program's history, and a lot of that had to do with Dr. McGee. And so, you know, everywhere I've tried to take it from one place and move it to another, and I think we've done that. But again, it's been, you know, I get to places because I sort of am going to will it. You know, I'm just going to, you know, I'm obsessed with that kind of stuff. But it's really about the team and the people around us and having a, you know, good leadership at the top above my head.
So what 3 things do you look for when you are hiring?
Yeah, well, I think number one, you have to understand the market that you're in, and that's going to dictate sort of the pool of coach or administrator that you're ultimately going to be able to hire or afford, and there may be a stretch candidate or two in there, and but again, you've got another pool that you think reasonably you can afford, and then it goes into intangibles and then tangibles. The intangibles, obviously, the first thing are looking for people, again, that sort of have that Joe Gibbs profile, that they're rooted first and foremost above everything else in their ethics, in their value, in their sense of purpose in what they're doing. And if their purpose is about teaching life first, about mentoring young people, a love for young people, and then coming right behind that is an insane competitive nature in a will to win. I mean, but I think, I tell a lot of young people who are looking at going into marriages or long-term relationships, and I go, my thought would be to align yourself not so much with people that you have common interests with, but that you have common values with. Our interests are going to change, but our values are pretty much going to stay the same. I look for the same, with coaches, that their passion and their purpose is young people and training them and building them up in life. I mean, that's why I'm in this job, is to try to hire the next set of Joe Gibbs and put them in front of young people. Secondly, it's a level of intelligence, cognitive decision making, critical thinking, problem solving. Are they really smart, and do they know what they're looking at? And writing parallel to that is do they have an insane amount of competitiveness? Are they competitive, and are they smart? Can they solve problems? And I think you listen to any high-level coaches, pick the sport, and you're going to find that they're very, very smart people. And so you're looking for those kind of people. And then their reputation is very important to me and to us. Are they doing things the right way? Are they teachers and developers as opposed to player procurement hucksters, if you will? And what's their experience been? Have they taken something and made it better, or have they just inherited something that, quite frankly, you should be winning there no matter who's in that seat? And I think that comparative set of experiences, where they've been and the kind of jobs they have, matter an awful lot.
Now, when did the light bulb go off for you? You said you worked for Merrill Lynch. When did you decide that you wanted college sports administration in your career?
That's a great story, because all through college and really through most of my NFL career, again, we managed to put together a great book of business. I wanted really nothing more than to be an investment banker, and I was working on putting together an arena football team, some investors that I was on a minor league hockey advisory committee with. They came to me and said, will you put together do the due diligence on an arena football team for us? And so I was working on that. And part of it, Mike McGee was the AD as you know, at South Carolina, had been the AD at Southern Cal for 15 years, and he had talked about building a new arena at South Carolina. I said, okay, here's a guy that's been in a pro market. He's probably had a lot of experience with minor league sports and professional sports. And I said, I'm going to go down there and talk to him about just the finer points of, leasor relationships, and they might be open to a professional partner or tenant in their building. So I go down and Mike and I just have a little bit of small talk, and I start my spill, and he cuts me off right in the middle of my mid-sentence and slams his fist down on the table and goes, look here, you need to come work for me, learn what you're doing before you lose a whole bunch of your own money. And I really was speechless. I didn't know what to say. I just sort of leaned back in my chair, and I had been on these college leadership, student leadership forums throughout my entire NFL career, and so I had this love for college students and sort of teaching and leadership and all that sort of stuff. And it just resonated with me, and I sort of leaned back and I said, yeah, I really would like to do something maybe more with my life than just making money. And this seems like a way that I can have a broader impact by putting ourselves in a position again to hire the coaches that can go out and create super meaningful change with young people. And so I told Mike I'd call him back in a week, and I called him back in a week and said, let's have a discussion. And that's how that whole conversation started.
Now, when I interviewed Heather Lake, the athletic director at Pitt, she said her favorite part of the job was getting to take someone else's child in, their formative years, basically a teenager away from home for the first time and helping them develop. And what's your favorite part of the job?
Absolutely. That is without a doubt, that piece of it. And, I tell parents, you're going to deliver them to us, and then we're going to deliver them to the world and into their communities with an idea that they can go out and make the world a better place. And sometimes you don't always see that specifically, or you don't see that necessarily, the fruits of that for sometimes decades to come until they come back and they go, they join your athletic club, they make a gift, or you see them now on a local board for the Cancer Society or the United Way, and so it literally, and having been in the business now 15 to 16 years, those student athletes, early ones, are just now in that position where they're, in their 30s, mid 30s, and where they're having meaningful careers and really starting to give back. And so to me, that's, it's a little bit of buying into a dream in some ways, but I am starting to see some of that, the fruits of that labor.
Now, you've certainly been successful in fundraising and facility development everywhere you've worked. How's that going at George Mason? Yeah,
great. We've had a great run here. Again, people have been very generous and have opened up, and some of those have been business deals. The naming rights here was worth $14-15 million to us over a 20-year period. We've put together a number of business deals that have inured our benefit. Some of those were low-hanging fruit, as I would say, sure. and others have been more complex. And but our fans and our donors have really stepped up and helped us, and we've demonstrated a need for infrastructure. We're not going to be in an arms race here, and I've really, I never have had that mentality of we're going to do the things that are right for us and right for our young people, to give them the resources that they need and give the coaches the resources to teach and develop, and that are not going to be obviously a negative in the recruiting game, but we're going to be smart with our money, where we can renovate a capital asset and do it for 25 cents on the dollar. We're going to always look at that first. That makes sense, rather than just building something to build it. So, I just think no matter where you are, and that's, again, the same thing we did at South Carolina, where, it was every day I'd walk down the hall and I'd have the same conversations I have here. Well, Alabama's doing this, Georgia's doing that, LSU's doing that, Florida's doing this, and so it's, here it's VCU's doing this, and so it's a little bit of the same argument or conversation that you get, but I think you, as a AD and as a leader, you have to sort of step that back and go, here's what's in the best interest of our program long term, what our market will afford us to do, and are there ways to get a 7 today, say on a 10-point scale, can I get a 7 today versus waiting 5 years to get a 10? Or can the 7 put us in a position to get a 10, 4 or 5 years down the road? And so it's a little bit of that, philosophy.
And so when you say you're not going to engage in the arms race, how do you recruit the personnel here? Because, there's a perception out there that everybody wants to be at the big FBS school and eventually, ride that football program to championships. So how do you recruit the players, the college sports personnel to come work for you here at a school that does not have football?
Right, and that is true. A lot of kids do want to be at that level, and they do see that as their opportunity to compete at the highest level in basketball and men's basketball, and obviously the A-10's a basketball-centric conference. We've been to we have 2 or 3 schools that have been to a Final Four. 2 or 3 others that have been to Elite 8 or Sweet 16. So we've seen a lot of success here, and I do see a set of young people that want to be in a basketball-centric, where they know, and coaches, where that's the focus. I think the Big East sees the same thing, that and you've seen now a national championship that's been won, in what we would consider the conference that's just above us on the RPI scale. So, that is our goal, is to win a national championship, and to me it's certainly doable because of that example that's already been laid out. We've been to a Final Four some of the time, like anyone else. You got to catch lightning in a bottle, no matter what level you're at. And but I think it's certainly doable when you look at the kind of institution we have and the area that we live in, and so I think there's a group of kids out there that are looking for that, and there's also I think a group of young people that are smart enough to see, I can go somewhere and I'm going to compete for minutes. I may or may not get those minutes, but I can come to, and we're seeing that in women's basketball right now, where we have a fifth-year transfer that's transferred from UConn, Natalie Butler. And now she's leading the country in rebounds and is on pace to be the player of the year in our conference. And so I think there's that opportunity for young people to come into the Atlantic 10 and really showcase their talents in a way that they may not be able to, or the odds are that they're not going to get the minutes to do that at in a maybe Power 5 level.
Now, in looking for that competitive drive, Mark Ingram, the athletic director at UAB, he said he still has that competitive drive. He played football for Tennessee, that he still blocks his kids' shots in the driveway. Now, are you the cool dad on the street? Do you let your kids score the baskets on you on the driveway, or are you swatting their stuff away?
It's all about teaching and development. I have that urge to win everything, and that's never going to change. I mean, I've accepted that fact that I'm going to have a competitive issue really until the day I leave this earth, and that's just not going to change. What I have learned is how to manage that in a way that does not I don't like to use the term freak people out, but it's, in terms of staff and others that haven't necessarily lived that life. I learned early on as an administrator that could drive some people, who don't know what that means. Sure. And so I've learned to sort of manage that in a different way. And but certainly, with my kids and others, it's how to help. I swat the ball when I need to, and I let them score when it's in their best interest to do so.
So in terms of freaking you out with the competitive nature, I was at the University of Wyoming interviewing Tom Berman, the athletic director, and I was talking to a female golfer. And she said, she was a scratch handicap. I said, how about your dad? And she said, well, the old man plays to a 13 or 14. I said, would you ever cut him a break? Do you let him use the short tees and you play from the long tees? And she gave me this look like I was crazy. She said, no, I may give him the occasional mulligan, but there's no way that's happening. Do you see that same competitive nature in your female athletes here at George Mason?
Oh, yeah, I absolutely. They're as competitive as any. And I think that's a real skill set that I think works well here, particularly or at our level, is finding young people who are inherently competitive like that, but also have a high degree of resiliency, where they know how to bounce back. And we may not have all the resources to counsel everyone we need to. 500 of them the level that we would like. So we are always looking for those kind of kids, but they're out there. Sure. in large quantities. I mean, they're just as competitive. Our golfers, our tennis players, as our high level track athletes and basketball players are.
From both personal and professional standpoint, what have you seen the impact of Title IX be on college sports?
Oh, it's been amazing. You cannot, and for someone who's had a younger sister that I saw competing in the late 70s without a proper equipment and without the same focus that I had playing high school football or middle school, it has been it has been great to see, and it has absolutely been the right thing to do. And I always have to resist the urge to say it's a shame that we had to have a law to make us do what was the right thing to do, but we did, and it's just been tremendous. And you look at my alma mater and just what's happened there in women's basketball. You see an African American female leading that team. You see averages of 13, 14, 15,000 people a game at one of their games, and it's just, to me, that's all a function of Title IX.
Now, do you see your athletes, both your female and male athletes, bringing that competitive nature into the classroom?
Oh yeah, we have our 500+ student athletes have a cumulative 3.15 GPA.
Continues to rise,
and it does, and so I think they 100%. It's one of the best group of young people, groups of them that I've ever had or been associated with, from off the court or field, the way they represent us, the way they represent us in the classroom. It's been they had an A10 record last year for total numbers on the Atlantic 10 Commissioners Honor Roll. So, yeah, our kids are getting it. Our faculty does a tremendous job here. I think some ways that's a function of being a young institution that's had to bootstrap its way up in a very short period of time and has gone a long way, and that there's in higher ed, I mean, they've got, we're now a Tier 1 research university, which is, your top 100 research universities. And but it's created a different culture of buy-in, I think, from the faculty. And so I do see that as it really inures to our benefit for our student athletes.
When I worked on Capitol Hill, I dealt with a congressman, Dr. Stephen Horn, who had been president of Long Beach and had also had his PhD from Harvard. And he told me he thought that George Mason had more potential than any other public university in America, including UVA, because of its position in the D.C. area.
It's unbelievable. Over half of the growth of in-state students last year in the Commonwealth happened at George Mason University, and that's without us really being aggressive on in-state. I think if the General Assembly in the Commonwealth were to sort of take the proverbial governor off of this thing, it would just explode. I mean, we'll be at 38,000 students, which is the largest research university in the Commonwealth. It's well run. It's a very well run university, and it's in an area where there's an extraordinary jobs market here. Our students, our graduates, have the highest starting salaries of any institution in the Commonwealth, including UVA and Tech, which are amazing institutions. Yes. We're just in a great area to do that, and I think over the next 7 years, we're poised to be somewhere around 43,000 students at that point, and it's that input side continues to rise. Although that's not our real goal, is to sort of from an exclusive or an exclusionary perspective, it's kind of more about access. But our outcomes, we're graduating minorities at the same level we're graduating non-minorities. Our loan default rates are some of the lowest in the country. So they're coming in, they're getting an affordable product, they're leaving getting great jobs, and they're career ready when they leave here. So to me, it's an amazing story.
Now, in terms of this year, Jeff Bezos, the CEO of Amazon, has selected Northern Virginia as one of the top 20 areas to locate their second headquarters. What from George Mason would sell him with Northern Virginia?
Well, there's a couple of things. One, we are, as a primary workforce provider in Northern Virginia, whether it's teaching, whether it's cybersecurity, whether it's engineering, law, all those things, and that's really our mission here, is to improve the prosperity and quality of life of Northern Virginia and through a research perspective. So Amazon's going to come in wherever they go and ultimately create 50,000 jobs. It's not 50,000 on the front end. They'll get there over time, but that's 50,000 jobs.
We certainly need the traffic here, that's for sure.
Yeah, I know, right? We need to start hovercrafts.
What sporting event would you have him come to at George Mason to sell it?
Yeah, certainly basketball, I think, is one where you see we have a very educated fan base here, and one that really knows what they're looking at. And when we have an outstanding arena here, as you know, with 10,000 seats, and so when it's at capacity and it rocks and it is electric, and I think that would certainly give them a sense of what exists here. But I think if you look at our academic programs and what we do for the local community and throughout the DMV as a whole, and along with the other research universities, to me this is the center and the hub of business and the intersection of politics and business.
Now, if Bezos can't make that game, can College AD get his tickets?
And figure it out.
We look forward to it.
Thank you so much.
This is Jonathan Yates at George Mason University in Fairfax, Virginia. College AD has left the building.